At 3 a.m., the hospital hallway does not care about your history. The lights are too clean. The floor is too quiet. A plastic ID wristband circles the wrist like a small public record: name, date, room, condition. And beside the bed, the ventilator keeps its mechanical rhythm. Hiss. Pause. Hiss. Pause. You sit there with someone you have not spoken to in years. Not because the past disappeared. It did not. Not because the old injury became harmless. It did not. But because this moment has arrived, and it is asking for judgment before it asks for words. The first impression says, this is urgent. This is personal. This is your last chance to settle the account. That is the danger. Not the hallway. Not the machine. Not the silence. The danger is assent. The danger is letting an old grievance seize the ruling faculty and call itself truth. Epictetus would not ask whether this ends the way you want. He would ask whether your next response belongs to you. The boundary of control is never more necessary than when the room makes everything feel final. A hospital ward at 3 a.m. has a way of shrinking the world. The hallway is silent. The chairs are hard. The light does not flatter anyone. The ventilator keeps speaking in its own cold rhythm, as if time has become mechanical. Hiss. Pause. Hiss. Pause. And your mind begins to argue. It says, this is the moment. Say what was never said. Demand the apology. Make the record clear. Do not let them leave this world thinking they were right. That voice feels strong because it feels old. But age does not make a judgment true. You are sitting beside a dying relative you have not spoken to in years. That is the event. The years of silence are part of the event. The plastic ID wristband on their arm is part of the event. The ventilator, the sterile ward, the hour, the family history pressing against your throat, all of that belongs to what has appeared before you. But the meaning is not yet settled. This is where Epictetus would begin. Not with the outcome. Not with whether the other person wakes up. Not with whether they understand you. Not with whether the family later approves of what you did. He would begin with the division. What is yours? Your judgment. Your assent. Your intention. Your attention. Your next response. What is not yours? The timing of death. The condition of the body in the bed. The mind of the relative. The opinion of the family. The reputation that may follow you. The past events that already happened. The words they did or did not say years ago. The outcome of this night. You may influence some things. You do not govern them. That distinction is not cold. It is clean. Without it, you will try to carry the whole room on your back. You will try to control whether the dying relative gives you regret, understanding, tenderness, agreement, closure, or confession. You will try to control how your own memory will judge you tomorrow. You will try to control whether anyone else thinks you are noble, bitter, absent, weak, or unforgiving. That is how the mind becomes enslaved in the name of importance. The external thing being worshipped here is comfort. Not physical comfort only. Moral comfort. Emotional comfort. The comfort of having the scene resolve in a way that makes your pain feel recognized. The comfort of hearing the right sentence before time runs out. The comfort of making the other person carry the weight you have carried. But comfort is not the ruling faculty. Comfort is an external condition. Sometimes it arrives. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes a person dies before speaking. Sometimes a person speaks and still does not say what justice would demand. Sometimes the family story remains crooked. Sometimes the last room does not correct the first injury. If your worth depends on that correction, then your worth has been placed outside your government. That is the error. The mind points to the ventilator and says, hurry. It points to the wristband and says, this is your last leverage. It points to the silence and says, fill it with the old case. But the mind is not yet wisdom. It is only presenting an impression. A disciplined person does not obey the first pressure. You can sit there and feel the force of the old grudge without handing it command. You can remember what happened without making memory your master. You can admit that the relationship was damaged without using the bedside as a courtroom. You can refuse the lie that, because the situation is serious, every impulse inside you is authorized. Seriousness does not make resentment wise. The boundary of control brings the whole scene back to scale. You are not here to control the ending. You are not here to force a confession out of a fading body. You are not here to polish your reputation for the invisible jury in your head. You are not here to turn a hospital ward into evidence that you were right all along. You are here to govern what is yours. Look at the plastic ID wristband. It does not say, settle every account. It says there is a human being in a bed, with a name, a body, and a condition. That is enough fact for the present moment. Add nothing rash. Your task is smaller than the mind claims. You can choose whether to speak. You can choose whether silence is disciplined or cowardly. You can choose whether a sentence is offered as duty or thrown as revenge. You can choose whether your face becomes a weapon. You can choose whether the next breath you take belongs to attention or to old anger. You cannot choose the answer. That is the hard lesson. You can say, I am here. You can say nothing. You can place a hand near the bed. You can remain upright in the chair. You can refuse to drag the past into the room as if the dying body must now stand trial. You can conduct yourself in a way that does not need applause to be decent. But you cannot make the night obey you. The ventilator may keep hissing. The relative may never wake. The family may misunderstand. The old wound may remain old. The outcome may remain unfinished. And still, your part is not unfinished. Your part is the choice made before assent hardens into action. Your part is the line between event and judgment. Your part is the refusal to let the external outcome become the god of the room. A person who understands control does not become passive. He becomes exact. He stops spending his strength where he has no command. He stops pleading with the past. He stops demanding that another mind repair his own. He returns to the only place where character can be built or lost, the next governable response. At 3 a.m., in that sterile hallway, with the ventilator counting what you cannot control, the question is not, will this end the way I need? The question is, will I surrender my judgment to what is not mine? The mind does not first meet the hospital room as a philosopher. It meets it as pressure. The ventilator hisses, and the first appearance comes quickly. This is unbearable. This must be answered. This silence means something. This dying body has power over the whole story of my life. That is an impression. An impression is not yet truth. It is not yet command. It is the first thing thrown before the mind. It arrives with force. It dresses itself as certainty. It does not ask permission before appearing. You hear the machine. You see the plastic ID wristband. You notice the stillness of the hallway. You remember the years of distance. And suddenly the old family grudge stands beside the bed like it belongs there. But it does not belong there by nature. It enters because the mind adds judgment. The event is simple, even if it is painful. You are sitting with a dying relative you have not spoken to in years. The judgment says, this proves I was abandoned. This proves I must defend myself. This proves that if I do not speak now, I lose. This proves that my worth depends on what happens in this room. That is not the event. That is the mind's ruling about the event. Epictetus would make that distinction hard and clear. The event is outside your command. The judgment is yours. The impression knocks. Assent opens the door. And this is where many people lose their freedom. They do not lose it because the room is powerful. They lose it because they agree too quickly with the first appearance. They assent before examining. They allow the old wound to choose the next word. Then they call that honesty. But not every unfiltered sentence is honest. Some are only undisciplined. At the bedside, the assent trap is precise. The mind says, bring it up. Say the old thing. Make them hear it. Make the room acknowledge the damage. Do not let the last silence protect them. That impulse may feel like justice. Examine it. Is the next sentence governed by reason, or by the hunger for comfort? Is it duty, or is it retaliation wearing the clothes of duty? Is it spoken because it is fitting now, or because the mind cannot stand an unfinished outcome? A person who practices Stoic judgment does not ask, do I feel this strongly? Of course you feel it strongly. Strength of feeling is not evidence of right action. A storm is strong. A mob is strong. Panic is strong. Old resentment is strong because it has rehearsed its speech for years. None of that gives it authority over the ruling faculty. The question is different. What have I assented to? If you assent to the impression that this person's final condition controls your worth, you will become a servant of the outcome. If you assent to the impression that the past must be repaired tonight, you will demand from the room what the room may not have to give. If you assent to the impression that reputation is at stake, you will start performing for an audience that is not even present. Then every pause becomes an accusation. Every breath becomes a symbol. Every silence becomes proof. That is how judgment corrupts perception. The ventilator is no longer a machine. It becomes a clock of revenge. The wristband is no longer identification. It becomes evidence. The bed is no longer a bed. It becomes a courtroom. The relative is no longer a human being in a hard hour. They become the representative of every injury you carry. The mind has added too much. Stop there. Name the impression. This appears urgent. This appears personal. This appears like my last chance. This appears like silence would make me weak. Good. Now do not bow to it. An impression named is no longer hidden. It can be examined. It can be separated from the event. The disciplined mind says, you are an appearance, not a command. Return attention to the plastic ID wristband. Not as sentiment. As anchor. It brings you back to what is actually present. A name. A body. A room. A night. A choice. Not the whole past. Not the whole family system. Not the invisible trial of who was right. Just this, what is the next governable action? Assent must be slow where the cost is high. You may decide to speak. But if you speak, let the words pass through judgment first. Let them be chosen, not thrown. Let them answer the present duty, not the old appetite for control. You may decide to remain silent. But if you remain silent, let that silence be governed, not fearful. Let it be restraint, not surrender to reputation. The same outward act can come from different inner rule. A sentence can be courage or vanity. Silence can be wisdom or avoidance. Presence can be duty or performance. The Stoic question is not merely what you do. It is what faculty governs it. The grudge wants the first seat. Do not give it the chair. Let reason sit there. Let judgment examine. Let assent wait until the mind has separated what happened from what it means, what is painful from what is shameful, what is remembered from what is required. You are not commanded by the hiss of the ventilator. You are not commanded by the years of silence. You are not commanded by the fear that the story will remain unfinished. You are commanded only if you consent. Ascesis does not begin when life becomes quiet. It begins here. In the hard chair. Under the fluorescent light. With the ventilator keeping time. With the plastic ID wristband visible each time your eyes move toward the bed. With the old sentence rising in your throat and demanding permission to become action. This is practice. Not theory. Not a quote remembered when nothing is at stake. Practice is the moment when an impression presses, and the mind must decide whether it will be ruled. Epictetus would not treat this hospital room as an interruption of philosophy. He would treat it as the place philosophy was meant for. The hallway is the training ground. The bedside is the test. The family history is the resistance placed against the soul. And the exercise is exact. First, pause before assent. Not forever. Not dramatically. Just long enough to stop the first appearance from becoming law. The mind says, say it now. Practice says, wait. The mind says, this is the last chance. Practice says, that is an impression. The mind says, if you do not defend yourself, the past wins. Practice says, winning is not the measure here. The pause is not weakness. It is government. A person who cannot pause cannot claim to be free. He may have strong opinions. He may have a long memory. He may have sharp words. But if the first pressure decides the next action, he is being led. Second, name the impression. Do not argue with it vaguely. Name it. This appears to be my last chance for comfort. This appears to be a threat to my dignity. This appears to demand that I bring up the old grudge. This appears to mean that silence would erase what happened. Now the impression has been brought into the open. It can be examined. It is no longer moving in the dark, borrowing the voice of truth. Most people never do this. They feel the pressure and immediately serve it. They call the impulse natural. They call the reaction honest. They call the old wound proof. But the Stoic does not give command to whatever arrives first. The first arrival is often only noise. Third, return attention to the anchor. Look at the plastic ID wristband. Not to soften the story. Not to pretend there was no harm. Not to make a sentimental scene out of a difficult life. Look at it because it is present. It is factual. It belongs to this room, this hour, this body, this specific night. The wristband cuts down the mind's exaggeration. The mind wants to bring every year into the room. Every Thanksgiving. Every unanswered call. Every insult. Every silence. Every version of the story told by relatives who were not there. It wants to stack the past on top of the present until the present disappears. The anchor says, here. This bed. This name. This hour. This next response. That is enough. Fourth, separate event from judgment. Event, a relative is dying. Event, you have not spoken in years. Event, the ventilator hisses. Event, you are present in the room. Judgment, this means you must settle the account. Judgment, This means your worth depends on being understood. Judgment, this means the old grudge has authority. Judgment, this means comfort must be obtained before the night ends. The event may be painful. The judgment may be false. Do not confuse the two. This separation is not a trick to avoid feeling. It is the discipline that keeps feeling from becoming a tyrant. Pain may enter. Memory may enter. Sadness may enter. Anger may appear at the door. But none of them receives the office of ruler unless you appoint them. Fifth, choose the next governable action. Not the perfect outcome. Not the complete healing of the family. Not the rewriting of years. The next governable action. Maybe the action is to sit upright and breathe without feeding the grievance. Maybe it is to say one clean sentence, I am here. Maybe it is to remain silent because speech would be used badly. Maybe it is to ask a practical question of a nurse. Maybe it is to step into the hallway for a moment so your face does not become a weapon. The action must be small enough to belong to you. That is the mark. Ascesis trains the mind away from fantasy. The fantasy says, I must make this scene resolve. Practice says, I must conduct myself within it. The fantasy says, they must understand before time runs out. Practice says, understanding is not mine to command. The fantasy says, the family must see that I was right. Practice says, reputation is not character. This is how the refusal to worship the outcome becomes real. You refuse by returning to the work at hand. You refuse by not bargaining with what is not yours. You refuse by not letting comfort become the highest good. You refuse by treating your own ruling faculty as the place where the night is either lost or preserved. The ventilator continues. The hallway remains silent. The past does not suddenly become clean. But the practice is still available. In fact, it is only available now. Not in the imagined conversation you should have had years ago. Not in the speech you may never get to make. Not in the verdict you want from the family. Here. Before assent. Before the next word. Before the old grudge takes your hand and calls itself justice. Responsibility does not mean you own the outcome. It means you own your conduct. That distinction must be defended in the hospital room, because the mind will try to enlarge your assignment. It will say you are responsible for the meaning of the whole relationship. Responsible for the last expression on their face. Responsible for whether the family story becomes fair. Responsible for whether this night produces peace, apology, recognition, or regret. No. That is too large. And it is false. Your responsibility is narrower and heavier at the same time. Narrower because it does not include the outcome. Heavier because it leaves you no excuse inside your own choice. You are not responsible for whether the relative wakes. You are not responsible for whether they understand the damage. You are not responsible for whether years of silence can be repaired before morning. You are not responsible for whether others later call you cold, forgiving, bitter, loyal, absent, or brave. You are responsible for the judgment you approve. You are responsible for the intention behind the next word. You are responsible for whether you use the bedside as a place of duty or as a place of revenge. This is where conduct matters. Conduct is not decoration. It is not manners placed over chaos. Conduct is the visible shape of inner rule. When the ruling faculty is governed, the body follows with proportion. The voice does not need to conquer. The hands do not need to accuse. The silence does not need to punish. The face does not need to announce an old verdict. The room may remain painful. Conduct can still be clean. A disciplined person does not ask, what will make me feel relieved right now? That question puts comfort on the throne. It makes relief the master and judgment the servant. It asks the moment to pay an emotional debt it may not owe and may not be able to pay. The better question is, what action is fitting for my role, under what is actually present? You are an estranged sibling. That is not a simple role. It carries history. It carries disappointment. It may carry years of distance that were necessary, foolish, painful, or mixed. But even a complicated role does not free you from examination. The question is not whether the past was easy. The question is whether the past now receives command over your character. Duty does not require you to pretend. It does not require false warmth. It does not require a performance of closeness that has not been earned. It does not require you to say words you judge untrue. Stoic duty is not theatrical softness. But it also does not permit cruelty simply because cruelty can be explained. You may have reasons. Good reasons. Long reasons. Reasons no one in that hallway fully understands. Still, a reason for pain is not a license for disorder. An old injury may explain the impulse. It does not govern the response. So conduct must return to the boundary. Is this word mine to choose? Yes. Is their answer mine to command? No. Is this intention mine to examine? Yes. Is the family's future interpretation mine to control? No. Is this pause mine to govern? Yes. Is the outcome of the night mine to possess? No. There. Stay there. That is responsibility returned to its proper place. When responsibility is misplaced, the mind becomes dramatic. It imagines that if the scene does not resolve, the self has failed. It imagines that if no apology comes, dignity has been denied. It imagines that if the old grudge is not spoken aloud, truth has been betrayed. But truth is not always served by timing a sentence badly. Justice is not always served by forcing a dying room to become a court. Dignity is not always defended by making sure the last word belongs to you. Sometimes dignity is the refusal to be dragged by the demand for comfort. Sometimes duty is the clean restraint of a sentence that would only make the room serve your anger. Sometimes responsibility is sitting there without turning pain into authority. This does not make you passive. It makes you accountable. A passive person is carried by the room. An accountable person chooses his part inside it. He does not need the outcome to applaud him. He does not need the other person to become wise before he behaves with order. He does not need the family to understand his inner work. He acts from the faculty that is his. Look again at the plastic ID wristband. It reduces the grand argument. It brings the mind back from the trial it wants to hold. The person in the bed is not the entire past. The wristband does not list every grievance. It does not record who failed whom, who withdrew first, who spoke harshly, who refused to call, who carried the heavier version of the story. It gives a name. That is enough for duty to begin. Not fantasy. Not worship of the outcome. Duty. You can be present without surrendering judgment. You can refrain from accusation without declaring the past harmless. You can speak one measured sentence without demanding that it repair years. You can leave the room later knowing that the result was not yours, but the conduct was. That is the adult standard. No bargaining with fate. No performance for reputation. No obedience to the first impression. No turning comfort into a god. Only this, the event before you, the judgment within you, the action available now. And if the night remains unresolved, let it remain unresolved outside your command. Do not add the further failure of surrendering your own ruling faculty. The ventilator may continue its rhythm. The hallway may stay silent. The past may refuse to become simple. Still, responsibility has not disappeared. It has only become exact. Govern the next response. Freedom in that hospital hallway is not getting the ending you wanted. Freedom is not hearing the apology. It is not watching the old wound finally become understood. It is not having the family later admit that you carried more than they knew. Those things may come. They may not. Freedom is refusing to make them your master. At 3 a.m., with the ventilator hissing and the plastic ID wristband catching the light, the outcome will tempt you to worship it. It will say, if this ends right, you are at peace. If it does not, you are robbed. Do not accept that law. The event is not yours to command. The timing is not yours. The other mind is not yours. The final condition of the relationship is not yours. But your judgment is still yours. Your assent is still yours. Your intention is still yours. Your next response is still yours. That is where dignity remains possible. You may leave the room without comfort. You may leave without explanation. You may leave with the past still uneven and the night still silent. But you do not have to leave having surrendered your ruling faculty to resentment, reputation, or fear. This is the refusal to worship the outcome, to act with order when the result is uncertain. To choose duty without demanding payment. To speak, or not speak, from judgment rather than old grievance. To let the room be what it is, without letting it decide what you become. Return to what is yours to govern.